The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor as Helena entered the grand dining room of the mansion. Her wedding ring still felt foreign on her finger, just as she felt foreign in this house, a house that everyone believed belonged to her husband's family. "Darling, you look beautiful tonight," Edward whispered, squeezing her hand reassuringly as they approached the long mahogany table where his mother, Anna, sat like a queen on her throne. Anna's eyes, sharp as daggers, traveled from Helena's simple pearl earrings down to her modest heels. The corners of her crimson lips curled into a barely perceptible sneer. "You're late," she said coldly, directing her words solely at her son. "The chef has been holding dinner for 20 minutes. "I'm sorry, Mother," Edward replied, pulling out Helena's chair. "I had a late meeting at—" "No excuses." Anna cut him off with a wave of her bejeweled hand. "In this family, we respect mealtime." The emphasis on family hung in the air, a clear message that Helena was not included in that sacred circle. As they settled at the table, Helena caught the sympathetic glance of Maria, the head housekeeper who had worked for the family for decades. Something in Maria's eyes told Helena that she wasn't the first to suffer under Anna's reign. "James," Anna called to the butler, "please serve the family." The butler moved to Edward's plate, then Anna's, deliberately bypassing Helena. "James," Edward said, his voice wavering slightly, "my wife hasn't been served." Anna let out a theatrical sigh. "Oh, how thoughtless of me. I meant to say serve those of the house." Helena felt her cheeks burn, but she maintained her composure, folding her hands in her lap. The truth bubbled inside her like a cauldron. This mansion, with its sprawling gardens and antique-filled rooms, had never belonged to Anna or Edward's family at all. It was Helena's inheritance from her grandfather, a fact Edward had begged her to keep secret. Her dignity wouldn't survive knowing she's living in someone else's charity, he had pleaded on their wedding night. What Edward didn't know was how quickly his family's finances would deteriorate. Within months of their marriage, his father's investments collapsed. Helena had quietly stepped in, paying the staff's salaries, maintaining the estate, and keeping the family from complete financial ruin, all while Anna continued to treat her like an opportunistic intruder. James hesitated, looking uncomfortably between Anna and Helena. "It's all right, James," Helena said gently. "I can serve myself." Anna's triumphant smile faded slightly at Helena's dignity. "Edward," Anna said, swirling her wine, "I saw Victoria at the club yesterday. You remember Victoria, of course, the daughter of Judge Parker. She asked about you." She paused meaningfully. "Such a shame things didn't work out between you two. She comes from the right kind of family." Edward stared at his plate, his jawline tightening. "Mother, please." "What?" Anna feigned innocence. "I'm simply stating facts. You deserve someone worthy of our family name, someone who understands our traditions." The room fell silent, except for the quiet clink of silverware. Helena could feel the eyes of the staff on her, waiting for her response. "Curious," Helena finally said, her voice calm but firm, "because between the two of us, it was Edward who chose me." Anna's eyes narrowed dangerously. For now." Later that night, as Helena brushed her hair before bed, she caught Edward watching her from the doorway of their bedroom. "I'm sorry about dinner," he said, his eyes filled with guilt. She's from a different generation." Helena set down her brush. "Your mother doesn't want me here, Edward. She never has." "She'll come around," he insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. But as the days passed, Anna's hostility only grew more pronounced. Helena noticed her whispering to the staff, changing arrangements Helena had made for the house, and, accidentally, excluding her from family gatherings. One evening, Helena overheard Anna on the phone. "Don't worry, she won't be a problem much longer. I'll make sure of it." A chill ran down Helena's spine. Just how far was Anna willing to go to remove her from the house that secretly belonged to Helena herself? The sound of screeching tires and shattering glass changed everything. "Mr. Edward has been in an accident," James announced, his usually composed face pale with shock. "They've taken him to the hospital." Helena felt her world tilt as Anna clutched her chest dramatically. "My son, my poor son," she wailed, already moving toward the door. "James, get the car ready immediately." At the hospital, the doctor's words blurred together. Severe concussion, multiple fractures, induced coma, while Anna performed for the hospital staff, positioning herself as the primary concerned party, with Helena relegated to the background. "Family only in the ICU," Anna informed the nurse with a pointed look at Helena. "I'm his wife," Helena said firmly. "And I'm his mother," Anna replied, her voice dripping with venom. "Blood before rings, dear." For 3 days, Helena maintained a vigil at the hospital, returning to the mansion only to shower and change clothes. On the 4th morning, she woke to strange noises echoing through the marble hallways. Following the commotion downstairs, Helena froze at the sight before her. 2 men were carrying her clothing trunks toward the front door. Another was removing her paintings from the walls. The entire staff stood in the grand foyer, watching with uncomfortable expressions. "What's happening?" Helena demanded, her voice echoing through the hall. The workers paused, looking uncertainly toward the drawing room. Anna emerged, dressed impeccably in black, a clipboard in her manicured hands. "Ah, Helena, you're awake." Her smile was cold and satisfied. "No need to worry. I'm simply restoring this house to its rightful order." Helena stared in disbelief. "Ah, you're removing my belongings." "I'm removing you," Anna clarified, her voice laced with triumph. "Edward isn't here to protect you anymore, and frankly, we both know this arrangement was temporary. This house belongs to our family, not to some girl who trapped my son into marriage." The staff watched the confrontation with wide eyes. Helena noticed Maria wringing her hands nervously. "You can't do this," Helena said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Anna laughed, the sound sharp and humorless. "My dear, I can and I am. This is my house. I decide who stays and who goes." The silence that followed hung heavy in the air. The movers looked uncomfortable, shifting their weight from foot to foot. The staff exchanged nervous glances. Then, a throat cleared from the doorway to the library. "Mrs. Anna," said Mr. Arnold, the house administrator who had managed the estate for decades, "I must interject." He stepped forward, his aged frame straight and dignified. "No changes to the household can be made without Mrs. Helena's authorization." Anna's perfectly arched eyebrows knitted together in confusion. "And why would that girl have any authority over my family home?" Mr. Arnold's gaze shifted briefly to Helena, who gave a slight nod. The time for secrets had passed. "Because," he said carefully, "according to the legal documents in my possession, Mrs. Helena is the sole owner of this property." Anna's face contorted with shock and fury, her clipboard clattering to the marble floor. "What ridiculous nonsense is this? Why would my son's wife have any claim to our family estate?" Helena stepped forward, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "Because it was never your family estate, Anna. This mansion belonged to my grandfather. It's my inheritance." Anna's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for water. "Impossible! This house has been in Edward's family for generations." "No," Helena said quietly. "Edward told you that to protect your pride. The truth is, my grandfather purchased this house 20 years ago when your late husband was forced to sell it to cover his debts. Edward knew the truth when we married. The movers had stopped working entirely, frozen in place by the unfolding drama." "Everyone," Helena said, addressing the workers, "please return my belongings to where they were. Thank you for your time. but your services won't be needed today." Anna's face had drained of all color, her perfectly composed facade crumbling as the reality dawned on her. For the first time since Helena had known her, Anna was speechless. "This isn't over," she finally managed to hiss before storming up the grand staircase. Helena watched her go, knowing that indeed this was just the beginning. Over the next several days, a palpable shift rippled through the mansion. The walls themselves seemed to hold their breath, waiting to see how the power struggle would unfold. Anna emerged from her room the morning after the confrontation, dressed as immaculately as ever, acting as though nothing had changed. She swept into the dining room at precisely 8 a.m., her usual time for breakfast. "Coffee, James," she commanded, snapping her fingers without looking up from the newspaper she had brought with her. No one moved. Anna lowered her newspaper, irritation flickering across her features. "James? Are you deaf? I said coffee." James, who had served the family for 15 years, glanced uncertainly toward the doorway where Helena stood, silently observing. "Mrs. Helena," James said carefully, "would you like coffee served?" Helena nodded. "Yes, please, for both of us." Anna's face reddened as she watched the interaction. When James placed a cup before her, she didn't touch it, as if it might burn her with the humiliation of requiring Helena's permission. This scene repeated itself throughout the day. Anna ordered lunch at noon. The kitchen staff looked to Helena. Inna instructed the gardener to cut fresh roses for her room. He waited for Helena's approval. Each little rebellion was another nail in the coffin of Anna's authority. By evening, Anna was seething. "This is absurd," she snapped when the housekeeper ignored her request to turn down her bed. "I have lived in this house for 30 years. These people worked for me before you even knew my son existed." Helena, who had been reading in the library, closed her book with a sigh. "They work for the house, Anna, and now they know who truly owns it." The next morning, Helena found Anna in Edward's father's study, speaking with a well-dressed man who was examining an antique grandfather clock that had stood in the corner for generations. "Ah, Helena," Anna said with forced cheerfulness, "don't mind us, just handling some family business." The man extended his hand. "Daniel Torres, antique appraiser. This clock is a magnificent piece, easily worth 50,000. Mrs. Anna is considering selling it to me." Helena smiled politely. "I'm afraid that won't be possible." Anna's smile didn't waver, though her eyes hardened. "This clock has been in Edward's family for generations. I have every right. Nothing in this house can be sold without my approval," Helena interrupted quietly. "Mr. Torres, I apologize for the confusion, but the clock is not for sale." The appraiser looked between the two women, sensing the tension. "Perhaps I should come back another time." After he left, Anna rounded on Helena, her composure finally cracking. "What did you do?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Did you bewitch my son? Did you trap him? How did a nobody like you end up with this house?" Helena maintained her calm. "I'm simply where I belong." "You'll never belong here," Anna spat. "You'll never be one of us." "I don't need to be one of you," Helena replied. "This is my home. You're the one who needs to decide if you can accept that." That evening, as Helena sat alone in the garden, Maria approached with a tea tray. "Mr. Rodriguez is here. Mrs. Helena," she said softly. "The family lawyer." Helena nodded. "Please show him to the library and inform Mrs. Inna that her presence is requested." The stage was set for the final act. Mr. Rodriguez, a distinguished man with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes, waited in the library with a leather portfolio. Mr. Arnold stood near the fireplace, his hands clasped behind his back. Anna entered last, her face a mask of dignified defiance. "What is the meaning of this summons?" she demanded. "If you think you can evict me from my family home..." "Please, Mrs. Anna," Mr. Rodriguez interrupted gently. I believe we need to clarify the situation once and for all. He withdrew a document from his portfolio and adjusted his glasses. The property at 1428 Willow Avenue, including all furnishings, accounts, and associated assets, belongs exclusively to Helena Martinez, as bequeathed by her grandfather, Jonathan Martinez, on April 17, 2016. Anna sank into a nearby chair, the color draining from her face. This is some kind of trick, she whispered. I'm afraid not, ma'am, Mr. Rodriguez replied. The documentation is quite clear. This can't be right, Anna said, her voice barely above a whisper. Edward would have told me. Helena moved to the window, gazing out at the garden where the sunset painted the roses in shades of gold. The memories flooded back, Edward bringing her to this house for the first time, his nervous smile as he confessed the truth. My mother believes our family still owns the mansion, he had explained, his eyes pleading. She doesn't know that my father sold it to your grandfather to pay off debts. When your grandfather passed and left it to you, I should have told her, but... He had paused, shame evident in his expression. Her pride is all she has left, Helena. It would destroy her to know we've been living on charity. Is it charity when it's given with love? Helena had asked, taking his hands in hers. Now, watching Anna's world collapse around her, Helena wondered if their secret had been an act of kindness or cruelty. Mr. Rodriguez continued reciting the legal details, his voice a distant drone as Anna stared blankly ahead. Mr. Arnold stood silently, his loyalty to the house, not to any individual, evident in his stoic expression. This is preposterous, Anna suddenly exclaimed, surging to her feet. My son would never have accepted such an arrangement. Living in his wife's house, a Martinez man, impossible. Helena turned from the window. He accepted it because what united us wasn't money or property, Anna. It was love. Love. Anna's laugh was bitter and brittle. Love doesn't keep a family's legacy intact. Love doesn't preserve generations of tradition. My husband built this family's reputation, and my son was meant to carry it forward with a suitable wife, not some... Mrs. Anna, Mr. Rodriguez interjected firmly. I understand this is upsetting, but the legal reality remains unchanged. This property belongs to Mrs. Helena. Anna's eyes darted around the room, perhaps seeing it truly for the first time, the books Edward's father never read, the paintings purchased for prestige rather than appreciation, the antiques maintained by staff Anna barely acknowledged. What happens now? She asked, her voice suddenly small. Where am I supposed to go? The question hung in the air. Helena felt the weight of it, the weight of a woman who had defined herself by her position in this house, by the respect and fear she commanded within these walls. Without that, who was Anna? That depends, Helena said softly, on what you want. Anna looked up, confusion mingling with the defeat in her eyes. For now, Helena continued, nothing needs to change. Edward is still in the hospital. This is still your home. My home? Anna repeated incredulously. Edward, you've made it abundantly clear that it's not. A home isn't about ownership, Helena replied. It's about belonging. You've lived here for 30 years, Anna. Your memories are here. Your son's childhood happened within these walls. She paused, choosing her next words carefully. I'm not asking you to leave. Anna's perfectly manicured hand trembled as she reached for the back of a chair to steady herself. Why? She demanded. After everything I've done, after how I've treated you, why would you let me stay? Helena thought of Edward, lying unconscious in his hospital bed. What would he want her to do? Because family isn't just about blood, she said finally. Sometimes it's about choice. When Mr. Rodriguez and Mr. Arnold left the library, Anna remained seated, staring into the unlit fireplace. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked away the seconds, marking the end of one era and the uncertain beginning of another. Later that night, Helena stood on the balcony of the master bedroom, gazing out at the moonlit garden. She heard footsteps behind her and turned to find Maria. "Mrs. Helena," the housekeeper said softly. "The hospital called. Mr. Edward is showing signs of improvement. The doctor believes he may wake up soon." Helena felt tears of relief spring to her eyes. "Thank you, Maria." As the housekeeper turned to leave, she hesitated. "Mrs. Helena, the staff. We've been talking about Mrs. Anna." "Oh, some think she deserves to be asked to leave after how she treated you all these months." Helena considered this. She could evict Anna now. It would be within her rights, and perhaps even justified. The woman had tried to throw her out of her own house, after all. But what would that accomplish, beyond momentary satisfaction? "What do you think, Maria?" Helena asked. The older woman's eyes softened. "I think true strength isn't shown in how we treat those who deserve our kindness, but in how we treat those who don't." The hospital room was quiet except for the steady beeping of machines monitoring Edward's vital signs. Helena sat beside his bed, her hand gently holding his, when she felt the slightest pressure, his fingers twitching against hers. "Edward?" she whispered, leaning forward. His eyelids fluttered, then slowly opened. Recognition dawned in his eyes as they focused on her face. "Helena," he murmured, his voice raspy from disuse. She blinked back tears, bringing his hand to her lips. "Welcome back." Over the next hour, as doctors came and went, performing tests and expressing cautious optimism about his recovery, Helena held back the news about what had transpired in his absence. There would be time for that later. When she finally returned to the mansion that evening, Helena found the atmosphere had shifted yet again. The staff moved about their duties with a new sense of purpose. Mr. Arnold greeted her at the door. "Mrs. Anna has remained in her room all day," he informed her. "She requested dinner be brought up." Helena nodded, unsurprised. "Edward is awake. The doctors say he's stable." "Wonderful news," Mr. Arnold replied with genuine warmth. "Shall I inform Mrs. Anna?" "I'll tell her myself," Helena said. She climbed the grand staircase slowly, feeling the weight of the day's events on her shoulders. The mansion had never felt so large nor so empty, despite the many people within its walls. When she reached Anna's door, Helena paused, then knocked softly. "Go away," came the muffled response. "Anna, it's Helena. I have news about Edward." A moment of silence, then the sound of movement. The door opened to reveal Anna, her hair loose from its usual perfect coiffure, her face bare of makeup. She looked older, suddenly, and infinitely more human. "Is he—" Her voice cracked on the unfinished question. "He's awake," Helena assured her quickly. "The doctors are optimistic." Relief washed over Anna's features, followed immediately by suspicion. "Why are you telling me this yourself? Why not send a servant?" "Because he's your son," Helena replied simply. "And because we need to talk." Anna hesitated, then stepped back, allowing Helena to enter the room. The normally immaculate space was in disarray, clothes strewn across the bed, drawers half open, a suitcase on the floor. "You're packing," Helena observed. Anna lifted her chin. "I assumed you'd want me gone as soon as possible. I'm simply expediting the process." Helena moved to the window, drawing back the heavy curtains to let in the moonlight. "I told you yesterday that you don't have to leave, and I don't require your charity," Anna snapped, though the words lacked their usual bite. "It's not charity," Helena said, turning to face her mother-in-law. "It's a choice, my choice." She walked slowly around the room, taking in the photographs on the dresser, Edward as a child, Anna with her late husband, family holidays from happier times. "For months, you tried to push me out," Helena said quietly. "You belittled me," excluded me, treated me like an intruder in my own home. And when Edward wasn't here to stop you, you tried to throw me out entirely." Anna didn't deny it. She sat heavily on the edge of the bed, suddenly looking every one of her 63 years. "So why?" she asked, echoing her question from the day before. "Why let me stay?" Helena considered her answer carefully. "Because this house has been your home for 30 years. Because despite everything, you're Edward's mother and he loves you. And because—" She paused, searching for the right words. "Because I won't become what you feared I was." The two women regarded each other in the dim light, the air between them charged with unspoken emotions. "I don't know how to live here as anything less than the mistress of this house," Anna finally admitted, her voice barely audible. "Then learn," Helena replied, not unkindly. "Oh, just as I had to learn to live here under your scrutiny." She moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. "Edward will be coming home in a few days. We can tell him together that we've reached an understanding." "Have we?" Anna asked, a hint of her old sharpness returning. Helena met her gaze steadily. "That's entirely up to you." As she walked down the hallway toward the master bedroom, Helena could feel the mansion around her, not just the physical structure, but the history it contained, the futures it would witness. It was her house now, not just in deed, but in truth. The staff had been right. She could have evicted Anna without hesitation. It would have been justified, even satisfying. But silence, Helena had learned, could sometimes be the most powerful response. And patience, the greatest victory. In the quiet of the night, as the mansion settled around her, Helena knew she had made the right choice. Not just for Edward, not just for Anna, but for herself. This was her home now, and she would build it on her own terms. With dignity, with grace, and with the quiet strength that Anna had never understood. And you? What would you do in Helena's place? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more amazing stories. Thank you for watching.